Want to make sure my mic was on? That's the best mic check of the day right there. Why don't you play today?
Too close to camp. You can't, too many other things to think about. Let the other guys play. Well, this is good this year. I'm not the new guy, so we have a small crowd. See who really cares about defense, right?
So, Coach, you had some improvements I'm sure you wanted to make in the offseason or tweaks or slight changes. Can you kind of describe those that you've been into since spring?
Well, overall, there's a toughness factor and a discipline factor and focus. I mean, those things that we can correct on our own by just being sounder and more fundamental and more disciplined. There were improvements that needed to be made that way, in particular in terms of explosive plays, giving up explosive plays. So I think the players know what to expect from me more than they did last year. And I certainly have had to make those adjustments to our scheme and what we do, to defend what happens in the Big 12.
At Big 12 Media Day, Mike talked extensively about he wanted to own a lot of what went wrong last year, and he talked about discipline. He talked about toughness and accountability in fourth quarter and playmaking, and instead of grabbing face masks and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely.
Can you go into more details about?
Well, yeah. I mean, we need to do a better job of knowing exactly what to do, right? I mean, there were mistakes made that I need to own, certainly, and that we need to get better at. We need to do a better job of pushing our players to play the game more disciplined. Too many penalties, the jumping off sides, the face masks, some of the targeting fouls and things that happen. Those are all in our control. We can control that. So we can become a better team just by fixing that. Before we even get into talking about personnel or scheme or anything, there are certainly enough areas to work on and correct, as Coach said, just in terms of our discipline, toughness, and focus.
Mike also talked throughout last year and in the offseason. He talked in the spring and then again last week, a couple of weeks ago, about Jim coming into the Big 12 and it eventually being an eye-opening experience for you, and how offensive coordinators think in this league and how quarterbacks operate in this league, wide receivers and schemes. Was it an adjustment period for you as long as you've been coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. I've said it before. It's not that I didn't know what goes on in the Big 12, but it's a lot like being a parent. You don't know it until you actually do it. And that's the way it is with being a defense coordinator here. I mean, offensive coordinators, head coaches, they're trying to score on every single play, and you don't see that in other conferences. And, you got to be able to handle that on defense. Your guys have to be able to play, as if every single play is a game. And that's a mentality and an approach that, I've been pushing and trying to instill. So we're going to continue to be aggressive in our coverage and in our package. I mean, we were 5th last year in the country in sacks. And aggressive in getting after the quarterback and playing a defense that recruits want to see and that fans want to see. But it's my job to make sure that, I continue to tweak it and continue to change things up enough to fit actually what happens in the Big 12 and some of the things that we need to get better at.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about AJ Green. I know he'd said at Big 12 Media Days that he wants to focus on being a more vocal leader this year. Just in the time that you've spent during the summer and seeing him, how do you think he's worked on that?
Yeah, AJ is a premier player. He should be one of the best corners in the country. I think he has adopted and owned the system that I brought here, and is passing that on to the younger players, but also, like you said, stepping up into a leadership role. Now, that is not natural for a lot of young men from this generation. You know, they're just not used to that kind of communication with their teammates, because everything is done via social media and texting, and that's a lot different. So, you know, we've been pushing AJ to step up, and he wants to do it. And you know, he's raising his own expectations and passing that on to his teammates.
Is there a certain moment you can think of so far where he showed that?
No, I just think it was a spring idea that he had, and executed it, you know, as we went for practice.
Through the ups and downs of last season, how do you think that's built him and Rodarius both, and kind of given them something to learn from going into this season?
You know, we put him into the toughest of situations, you know, against the best receivers and the best quarterbacks in the country, and put them into situations where they had no help and they were on their own, and definitely thrown into the fire. And to me, that's the only way you get better, is by going against the best and doing it. So they actually live through those experiences and learn what it's like to play at a high level against the best.
Someone had asked AJ what was on his bucket list, and he said skydiving, and he kind of compared that to, you know, the adrenaline rush of being on the football field, taking those risky plays. Do you see him as a guy who's not afraid to take chances?
Yeah, AJ has no fear. You know, he's willing to play each play, one play at a time, you know, as its own separate game. That's the way it's got to be, you know. And if you give one up, you have to have a short memory, you know. I don't think that you know is an issue for us with those two guys, right? I mean, they're going to get beat every now and then. That's life. You plan for that when you play aggressive defense as a defense coordinator. You know, it's everywhere else. It's everywhere else. You know, they're going to make a lot of plays. You know, it's everywhere else where we need to be better. I'm counting on those guys to be able to play against the best in the country and hold their own.
They are, like you said, there's a lot going to be on them this year. How do you approach your front seven with so many unknowns?
You just try to build a lot of depth. You know, we have a lot of guys who can step up. We're going to be multiple. You know, we're gonna be able to move guys around in different positions. We started it with Brailford last year. You know, moving him around. We're going to try to have a lot of guys on their feet and rotate guys in. You know, and I think it's a great opportunity to, you know, for a guy who can come in a limited role, and then the more plays he makes, the more time he gets. You know, so there's opportunity there.
With fall camp starting on.
And you know, there is a learning curve, and I expect it to pay off this year.
What do you like about Kyle Jr. and Israel Antoine?
Guys who have experience playing football, you know, at a high level, who can come in and physically handle the game at the line of scrimmage. You know, it doesn't matter how spread out the game is, there's still that hand-to-hand combat and that physicality that goes on between the tackles and at the line of scrimmage. And, you know, that's why it's hard for young defensive linemen to play, because they need time to develop that. It's much easier for young defensive backs to play. You know, we played a bunch last year. So I love the fact that these guys come in, you know, with experience. They're strong and physically developed, and you're ready to put right into the lineup.
You alluded to that young group of safeties that you guys have. What kind of step are you expecting them to take this year, all being a year wiser? Yeah,
I mean, they took a huge step in my mind from game one until the last game of the year. You know, if you watch the film, it's not even the same guys. And you know, there were a lot of true freshmen out there and young guys. So I think they're very good players with Peel and Bernard, even Malcolm. You know, I mean, these guys are. Trey Sterling had an unbelievable spring. So we're going to have a lot of depth there. They're a year older, played as true freshmen, took some lumps. I'm expecting a great year out of those guys.
You talked about Big 12 offenses, coordinators trying to score every play. Is that something that surprised you when you got here? You know, we talked during the spring and the fall before you got here about how good the Big 12 offenses are. Was there something maybe that surprised you about the way they played?
No, I can't say it's surprising, but again, when you look at things from a theoretical standpoint, it's a lot different than living it, on game day. So, yes, who understand the system. We have enough guys to be good right away. I think Kevin Henry has, who's been kind of limited with injuries his whole career, really came on to the end of last season, ended up starting the bowl game for us. And Amon is a guy who I have been building since I arrived, knowing that Justin was only going to be with me for 1 year. Amon is a guy I have been building since I arrived, and I've been pretty hard on him, to pick up the system, to learn the system, because I'm expecting him to really be the quarterback of the whole deal, and I have a lot of faith in him too.
What do you think? It's early and he hasn't gotten any games in yet, but what do you think so far of Sean Gleason, the way he prepares, the way he's come in, that his attitude, and maybe compare it to what Mike kind of prepared?
I'm not with those guys, but I mean, just from a personality standpoint, Mike was definitely a gunslinger type of guy, and Sean is more analytical, So I mean, you can see that in their approach. I don't expect the offense to change though, because that's Cowboy offense stays Cowboy offense.
How do you feel overall about the depth in your overall group?
I like it.
Spots that you wrote.
I like it. I mean, I would be concerned about the depth at the linebacker position. I think it's great, and I think it's great in the secondary. And even though we lost a bunch of guys up front, I think the depth there is very good. You're going to play a lot of guys. Linebacker would be the area where I'm concerned about the depth.
Calvin Bundage, he dealt with some injuries last year. It's a bit of up and down. What have you seen from him since the end of the season to the spring?
Calvin's been working extremely hard. He knows. He battles injuries. He's still battling them in the off season. When you look at Calvin from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, completely different, right? I mean, in our system, in our structure, this was built for him, and he wreaked havoc early on. But by the end of the year, he was worn out, So we need to get him to a point where he can consistently play that, a length of the season, and he's working hard to develop his body to do that.
Did you see, Colby made that great play in the bowl game to finish things off. From when you first got here and saw him, did you expect him to be that kind of playmaker in his first year by the end of the year?
Yes. He exhibits a football intelligence that a lot of guys don't have. Now, this is, I wasn't involved in recruiting Colby, so, I got lucky with him. And it's hard these days to determine in recruiting football intelligence, because a lot of times we're taking guys after their sophomore year. They're kids. So you have to really look at the program that they come from to give you a chance. But Colby has that it factor in terms of, and we saw less, in terms of knowing kind of where the play is going to go and what's going to happen. He has that. Jarek Bernard's a kid who comes from a great program. That program at Evangel, we just got Adrian Dizadare too. You're going to see him play as a true freshman, because that program at Evangel, the coach told me, I don't know, something like the last 20 guys they've sent to FBS, they've all played in their first year. So when you're looking at that football intelligence piece, a lot of times you got to take a look at the program where the kids come from, because you don't know. It's hard to find out.
It's that whole, you want them to understand it, but really it's about how quickly can you process it.
That's the difference that I talked about, whereas a NFL player does it in 0.4 seconds. If you do it in 0.6, you're not going to make it. So yes, the teaching, and I think our teaching is innovative. I think our system is innovative. But when it comes time to actually make the play on the field, you have to, it's part of defense. You got to figure out what play they're running. you know, and the sooner you figure out what play they're running, the more opportunity you have a chance to make the play, you know, and that's where I think Colby is good at that.
Is there one stat that you look at to determine that tells you we should be successful or we have been successful, or is that not something that you really look at?
No, I'm not a stat guy. I haven't been a stat guy. I think all I care about are wins. That's it, you know, because games are going to go different ways, and some low scoring, some high scoring. I don't think that's right for me as a coach to care about where we're ranked and where we're at. So it's just all about wins for me.
I asked you earlier about the Big 12 conference. Do you think with the newcomers, 40% of turnover at the head coaches, Les Miles, we've seen what he's done the last 15 years at LSU, defensive coach at Kansas State, Chris Kleiman, comes from a defensive background. Do you think it's maybe coming back to the mean a little bit offensively? Do you think we're going to see maybe a little less tempo and maybe a few more running plays?
I hope so. I mean, that would be great.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic. But
even at Texas Tech and West Virginia, those guys are not Dana Holgerson and Cliff Kingsbury.
Right.
They're going to throw it, but they're
right.
not.
Yes,
to that
no.
extent.
There's some opportunity that the league may come back to the mean more, but you know, I won't believe it until I see it. You know what I mean? It's just the reputation that it has, and you know, players get caught up in it. High school play, you know, the players that we recruit, you know, everything is built and geared towards being powerful on offense. You know, so I think those coaches, you know, they may come up to what the Big 12 is rather than go the other way, but we'll see.
I'm curious, you mentioned the recruiting part. Have you found that over the last 5-10 years, as so many teams at the FBS level have kind of gone to tempo, have you found it difficult to recruit certain positions on defense because high schools are doing it as well?
Absolutely. I think you know, those times where you could look at a high school kid who maybe played running back or played quarterback, and you could project him into being a linebacker or a safety. We still want to do that, but they just don't happen a lot anymore. You know, I mean, the high school kids and the coaches, everything is geared to offense. So it is difficult to find the kid who loves to play defense, knows how to play defense, can react to everything that happens on offense, you know, in warp speed. It just becomes harder to find.
Is it are you guys having to do more guesswork at certain positions to project guys?
Yes.
And I guess what are those spots?
Yes,
most
safety, and linebacker. You know, I think linebacker has become, in today's day and age, has become an extremely difficult position to recruit because, you know, you're put into so many different situations and you're put into open space against the most athletic players on the field, and then you have to line up and handle a 330-pound offensive lineman. So it's really tricky to recruit linebackers.
Now we have a year under your belt in the Big 12 here at OSU. How much are you tweaking your approach or your scheme, if at all?
Definitely tweaking my approach, no doubt. Scheme-wise, you know, will remain the same. But we want to have a defensive scheme that you know, is aggressive. We do, because we want to be attractive. You talk about recruiting. We want to be attractive to the high school kid who wants to play in the NFL. And I think what we do in terms of playing close and in your face to receivers, that's what they're going to do in the NFL. And we want those kids to be able to see that in our system. But I need to tweak it to be able to match what happens in the Big 12. So that's my job, is to put our team in the best position to win. And that means, you know, we had too many explosive plays last year. You know, we fifth in the country in sacks, but, you know, what's the trade-off? And that's what keeps me up at night, is trying to come up with that balance and find a way to do it without giving it away. You know, so that, you know, to create more, more disguise, more deception, and also give our team protection when we need it.
Were there things that maybe you learned in that first year that you were mixed up in going against offenses like this weekend?
Like I said, somebody asked me earlier, I expected it all. There wasn't nothing I didn't expect, but living it is a different story. You know, when you're you know, like having kids, when you're dealing with, you know, a couple children crying in the middle of the night, and you're trying to, you know, go to work the next day and all that. You know, it's great in theory, but when you actually do it, you know, it's a difficult process, and that's what I saw last year, is you know, going through it play by play, and you know, the aggressiveness of the coordinators and the head coaches, and you know, you got to be ready for everything. You got to teach your players to that each play is like a game, because they're trying to score on every play. So we need to have an appropriate response.
You had you put Jordan Brailford in different positions last year. He was very successful. Do you have a couple of guys that you feel like you can be that versatile?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I like Brock in that position, and Mike Scott, you know, who did it a bunch also. Yeah, we're going to have guys do that, and that worked out really well. And I think it kind of fits the approach we need to take in the Big 12 of having more guys on their feet. You know, that's what we need to do. We need to have as many guys on their feet. Now, you know, we can still be a 4-down approach like we were with Jordan, so teams don't know whether we're going to be 4 down or 3 down. That's the whole idea, and be more multiple. And that's another thing that we want to sell to the recruits, is that, you know, you can see what we did with Jordan's position last year, and very successful, and I think that's attractive to kids. You know, say, hey, I can do a lot of multiple jobs and make plays.
How big can Israel Antoine be for you guys this year?
Huge. I mean, he is a guy who has experience, a guy who has physical strength. You know, has done it, and he's very consistent. And he's a quiet kid, but he'll give you everything we have, in a really good, solid character kid. So, I mean, he can step right in and play.
Has there been any emphasis on lessening the penalties, because that was an issue last year?
Absolutely. You know, but we need to be a more disciplined team. You've heard Coach Gundy say it, and I take responsibility of that from a defensive standpoint. We need to be more disciplined and focused, and, you know, jumping off sides, the face masking, some targeting fouls. Those are all things that I need to keep working with the players on to realize that those are self-inflicted penalties. You know, we need to get better at not doing that.
I think you guys have 3 senior corners that'll probably all play this year. Is it important for you guys to find one of the younger guys, you know, to project for the future?
Yeah, we can't be. We can't ever let up on developing corners. You just can't do it in this game and in this conference. You need to constantly be looking at guys to come up in the system. You know, so we had Thomas Harper came in here, and Devin's brother came in here in the spring when he should have been going to his senior prom, and I thought he was fantastic. That's just one young guy who I know made an impression this spring as someone who's going to be developing into a great corner.
Thomas came in as labeled as an athlete. How do you guys go about finding a position for those type of recruits?
You know, you try them at a bunch of different places, and you try to see where they're the most natural at. You know, you give them a shot here and a shot there, and you know, they tend to make it at the place they're most comfortable. You know, they just play better there, and that's the way it works.